Okay. Welcome to the Smart Elections Election Protection Forum. I'm Lulu Friesdat, and I am a pale woman with long brown hair and bangs with a brick wall behind me. I am the co-founder and executive director of Smart Elections, and we hope that you're going to stay with us. This is a really fascinating and important and controversial topic. We're going to be talking about internet voting this evening. Bennie, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Bennie Smith, Shelby County Election Commissioner and Technical Advisor. I'm a male, black, low haircut, and I'm wearing a yellow tie with a white shirt and a blue suit. This is election day today.
Yeah, Bennie's got an election. You want to tell us?
Yeah, we're replacing our esteemed state representative. She died right after she won her election. Barbara Cooper, she was like a mother to me, but they're having the special election to replace her seat, and that's today. So I'm gonna have to tip a little bit early to get to that and conduct that election.
Right, so we're going to lose Bennie a little bit before the end of the program, but we have plenty to do. And I see our guest, Cliff Perez, is with us, so we'll be introducing him shortly. I'm very excited. He's an experienced and very talented advocate, and we're lucky to have him with us. So let's just tell you a little bit about ourselves. Smart Elections, we're nonpartisan, and the visual descriptions that we gave you are for those with visual impairments. There is closed captioning available on Facebook. So if you're watching on YouTube and you want closed captions, go ahead and switch over to the Facebook, Smart Elections Facebook channel, and you'll find the program there. You can watch on YouTube after we finish, and the closed captions will be there, but not live. And one thing you can do to help that is to make sure to like our YouTube channel, because eventually if we get enough subscribers subscribe to our YouTube channel, they will start to give us closed captioning live, and we would love that. We do not have our ASL interpreters right now. We don't have the funding for them. It ran out, but we are working on a grant to get more funding. So please do donate, and we'll tell you more about how to donate. You can go to smartelections.us and help us to get our ASL interpreters back. So tonight we are going to be talking about internet voting. And the question is it the promise of the future, or is it the worst idea ever? Bennie, what do you think?
Go with number two.
Bennie's a number two.
Worst idea ever.
Okay. I'm pretty much in that camp, but I'm trying to keep an open mind because I know that our guest is a very strong advocate for internet voting and would very much like to see it happen. So we'll be talking tonight about what is the promise of internet voting? What are the risks? And we'll be getting input from you. Really excited that you're all here with us. And I think at the end we'll do a vote, since this is, democracy.
Over the internet.
We'll vote over the internet as to whether, over this YouTube internet channel or your Facebook channel, whether or not you think we want to continue with, if we want to continue or expand internet voting here in the United States. So that'll be at the end, so stick around for the end. And then just a few housekeeping pieces of information. We want to make sure that you know how to get in touch with us. Smartelections.us is our website. You can find out more about us there. And one of the first things you can do when you get there is please sign up for our mailing list and make sure that we can stay in touch with you. It's right there at the top of the page. So go ahead, if you're not signed up for the mailing list, go ahead and put your email in there. And also make sure that if you are on our mailing list, you pull your emails from the promotions tab into your regular tab. If you're on Gmail or if you're on other email providers, there are ways to make sure we're on your approved sender list. And actually, in every email newsletter that we send out, we show you instructions for how to do that. Otherwise, we're going to be in your promotions tab and you'll forget about us. So we want to make sure that you can stay in touch and know what's going on. And if you want to reach out to us, it's contact@smartelections.us. And one thing that we really do value is your input, whether it's positive or negative. Constructive criticism welcome, as well as how much you loved the forum and what you learned, and how excited you were to be here. So you can also just throw those comments into the chat, and that's a great place to put comments about the forum, because we can just pull them right out of the chat and find out what your thoughts are about what's going on. We already have people jockeying for their position. I'm just going to let you know this is an audience that is pretty much, very much in favor of Cliff. Okay, we got a big fan club for you there. Cliff is awesome, but in terms of internet voting, bad idea, worst idea ever, another worst idea ever. Also another fan for Cliff. Awesome. And another comment about internet voting. Allow me to dissuade you sometime. As a lifelong computer jockey, I do understand the technology. So that's a computer expert saying not a good idea, but we're going to go through it and we're going to talk about what has happened. So I want to introduce Cliff now, and I want to go ahead and spotlight him, give him center stage. We're really delighted to have you with us. And please just take a minute or two and introduce yourself. You have quite a history.
Well, my name is Clifton Perez. I am the systems advocate at the Independent Living Center of the Hudson Valley in Troy, New York. I am legally blind. I was born this way. They don't know what the situation is. It doesn't have a name. So usually when I talk about it, I call it the Perezian syndrome. People can name things after themselves. I can name it after me. I have been advocating for the rights of people with disabilities since 1985, and I've been involved in just about every single major disability legislation that we've had since then, and including a lot to do with voting. I had a lot to do with getting HAVA passed in New York and implemented, even though they didn't listen to many of the suggestions I gave them, but here we are.
And for those who don't know, HAVA is the Help America Vote Act,
Thank you.
Which is
Yes.
one of the key pieces of federal legislation which mandated that we have accessible voting in every polling place in the country, correct?
That is correct.
In theory.
So every polling site has to have at least one.
Right. And we're still facing trouble implementing that. I know we go sometimes to polling locations and the ballot marking device isn't turned on, or it isn't working.
Always.
And it isn't accessible. The ramp isn't there. So always it's an ongoing struggle. I know there's been a lot of lawsuits, and I know that you've been very involved in that struggle.
Well, and part of that struggle was a more recent lawsuit about the electronic voting, so that at least people can get their ballot sent to them to their home or wherever, and they can fill it out and then just print it out and mailing it. Now, obviously, many of you have some issues about internet voting. You got some computer people who are against internet voting, who are experts in computers, and it's a no. Well, all I can say is that many things all through history have been no, and that has changed. I will say also, there's so many things I can say about that. For one thing, it's something, keep this question.
I want to just start out because when you and I were talking, it's not just like a random desire. You were very concerned about very specific reasons why people need what they call an electronic return. So right now, for example, in New York State, you can have an email ballot emailed to you, but you can't email it back. It's not legal. You have to print it out and then find a stamp and mail it in, figure out how to sign it if you're blind. And also, so you were talking about the actual challenges that some people face in doing that, correct?
Yeah, because I mean, the whole idea of voting, no matter who you are, right, is to have the ability to vote. So if you can't vote, regardless of security or non-security, it makes no difference if you can't vote at all. And so people with disabilities haven't been able to vote forever until fairly recently. And then even now, especially given the pandemic, given this, the danger for people with disabilities going out to polling sites, that made it even more difficult. And so we came up with this method for the mail-in ballot that people seem to be all like that's the panacea, even though mail gets lost every time. But nonetheless, that's the way we vote. But the problem is with people who are blind, and there are others, people with dexterity problems who cannot deal with the paper, people with learning disabilities, people with brain injuries. There's a host of people who, for whatever the reason, are unable to vote in this way. Blind people in particular, obviously, have a very, very difficult time. Even if they were able to print it, which you could by, if you have a printer. Then there's all the other issues that Lulu just mentioned about putting it in the envelope, writing it, all that stuff. So that just makes it very difficult, almost to the point of impossible, for people with disabilities to vote in this way. And
did you actually speak to specific blind voters who tried to vote with the, sending the ballot back and had difficulty?
Well, the problem that some of the folks have had in voting, as I said, was one, they have to have a printer. And so many of them do not, because since they don't read print, they don't have a printer. So then the Board of Elections answer is to go to the library. Well, if you can't see and you don't have somebody who can help you to get there, that's either not, the easiest way. And they haven't been very accommodating in terms of providing some other method for people to get their ballots printed. So
I think that's something else that you mentioned to me, is that the election officials that the community was dealing with in general were not tremendously helpful, weren't making helpful suggestions, weren't saying, well, why don't you come down here to the Board of Elections and we'll help you, or you don't get much help.
Right. They weren't giving suggestions like that. And then to make things, and then beyond that, it's when we talk about the poll sites, that's another area of where the Board of Elections falls short by not providing the poll workers with the training that they need. And so, as you mentioned earlier, Lulu, many times you go in and the machines are unplugged or turned off. They got a tarp over them. They're in some corner someplace, and you have to ask for it. There have been many times in the past where the poll workers announced out loud that I was a blind person and I was here to vote. I mean, just loudly, so everybody could hear. So everybody knew that I'm a blind person who needs to use the handicap machine, because that's what they called it. Until that time, and I wrote an article about that, and that stopped after that. But that's what we have to deal with. So
there's an attitude, and then there's also actual technology that sometimes fails. I know
exactly.
In New York, the Automark is a very old machine. I think some of them are as much as 15 years old, and they're literally just breaking down and just not functioning a lot now. I don't know if you've experienced that, but
and that's the better machine. That's not even the machine I use. I have to use the image cast, which is worse than the Automark.
Right. So there's a lot of problems, and maybe there's maybe there's ways that other solutions that can be worked on, but the solution that you're focused on at this point is internet voting and trying to allow people to vote on the internet.
Well, I support internet voting because I don't see any other method of voting that would be remote voting that would be fully accessible. If you can figure that out, that'd be great, and I'd be supportive of that. But I don't know of anything else. Do you?
Okay.
And my issue also about all of this is simple. About when I think about, can you solve a problem if you don't know what the problem is, or if you don't have any time to study and understand the nature of the problem? And I believe that if you don't at least try some other way of voting that is fully accessible, even if it may have its flaws, you cannot figure out what those flaws are. You cannot figure out how to fix those flaws unless it is used. So that's my other issue about any kind of voting that at least provides accessibility to people with disabilities who haven't been able to vote forever. Then we can work on what is wrong, as opposed to saying that everything is wrong, because as you all know, if there was some secure, 100% secure method of for providing votes, that would be great. And I would have a hard time going against that, but we don't. And so I'm just looking, if there's another way, as I said, I'm just looking for a way for people with disabilities to be able to vote on their own. Maybe the other issue to tackle is maybe change this idea of independent voting, which is not even in the Constitution. This is something that was brought in the 1880s from Australia, and the South loved it because it was a way for them to even keep African Americans from voting even less. And so it was used as a method to keep people from voting. Not to mention that we don't even know in the end whether or not the vote that they say is the vote was really the vote, since it's so secret. How do we even know ever that that's true? So
I just want to clarify there, because I feel like you said something besides ballot secrecy, and what you intended to say, I believe, was ballot secrecy.
Yes,
Yes, you're
voting,
talking
voting,
about the
voting
secrecy of
privately
the
in
secret ballot.
in a secret
Right,
room
you
or
said
something. That's what I meant.
independently, but I think
Yeah,
you were talking about the secrecy of the ballot. Right, the
right. The
secrecy of the
secrecy of the
ballot
ballot. Yeah,
is something that makes internet voting a whole nother enchilada, basically. It's different from anything else that we do on the internet, like banking or buying clothes, because it has to be private. That's that's how
exactly,
our laws exist, is that we have a secret vote to prevent coercion. Now, I got a lot
exactly.
of, I'm sorry, I just got some comments in the chat that people were having trouble with my video, so I unplugged my microphone to, but now it seems worse. So I'm sorry about that. I'm sorry about the technical difficulties. I hope that you'll just bear with us. So I want to go ahead and show a video that actually shows what happens when you put a ballot over the internet, and you're going to watch and see this 18-year-old hacker without much training is actually able to hack it. Here we go.
I'm going to simulate being a voter who's voting by email. So the first thing that I have to do is I've filled out my ballot. Now I'm going to write a message to the county clerk. So this handy email alias that I also own is countyelectionclerk@gmail.com. That's just who we're sending it to. We're going to put a subject line, my ballot, and this is my ballot. That's our text. Now what we're going to have to do is attach our ballot, and we're going to attach these three files. The first page, a second page, and a signature page, which I'll show in just a sec. So let's open those up. Those are now attached, so that's good. Now let's go check out what each of those pages has in turn. So these are the three exact files that I just uploaded to the email. The first page has instructions and a vote for Joe Smith and Bill Johnson.
Okay, so we're voting for Joe Smith and Bill Johnson.
The second page is reasonably inconsequential, but it just has another page just to simulate a real ballot going over email.
That vote, we're voting for Bobby Lewis.
Bobby Lewis, yes.
Okay.
And this third page is a signature affirmation page, basically.
Thank you.
So that's our page. Now, all three of those same exact files are uploaded here to the email.
Okay, this is all normal so far.
This is all normal.
They're in Boston.
Let's send it off.
And they had like a...
Sent off to our county election clerk, whose email happens to be open here in Gmail on Firefox.
So at this point, we're simulating sending this to the election clerk.
Exactly. So the election clerk has just received an email here from our alias that we sent it from, and with subject line, my ballot, text body, this is my ballot, and it includes 3 images. And the first page shows that indeed our vote has been changed from Joe Smith and Bill Johnson to Mary Kane and Elizabeth Martin. And that's where the money is. The rest of the pages haven't changed. They've just been attached to make it look like it was an email. It's just exactly as it was sent, except for that one change here on the first page.
So you intercepted this email on this computer and then sent it on its way?
Yes, we intercepted this email on a mail server that we're running on this computer, though it doesn't have to be running on this computer.
And would you be able to do this remotely?
Yep. If you were to set up a mail server and spoof any computer to think that that's a valid mail server, while in fact it's a malicious mail server, you could definitely get away with the same exact result.
So you have confidence that you could do this with almost any ballot being mailed by email?
Yes, you might have to edit the way you do this. So some email connections are secured with TLS encryption and other forms of encryption, and those would require different handling, but it's definitely not out of, it's definitely the same level of ease to get those ballots hacked as well.
And are you going to show me a little bit how you did it, how you intercepted the ballot?
If you want me to, it's very simple to show. It's text, but basically we edit a configuration file. This is one of the ways to see it. What we did is we sent it from our email alias on this machine, and somewhere in here it'll show that it was filtered out.
Can you tell me what that is?
So that's just basically showing that we sent it to this email address here via the filtering mechanism.
And what does that filter do?
It runs a bash script on the email that switches out the vote placement, the placement of the check.
So that filter is a program that changes the dot from one.
The filter doesn't. The filter just enables us to run a bash script every time it catches an email that we want to edit.
So that filter is what grabs the email for you. Okay, so once you grab the email, how do you change the dot?
So there are many ways to do that. In this particular one, given the time constraint, all we did is we pre-knew the location of both dots, so we just swapped them around. But in a real attack, you could use an image working tool set and an OCR tool set that are all free and open source to find maybe the political affiliation of a candidate or the candidate's name itself and swap a filled-in mark, which you can determine, into an empty blank and vice versa.
Did you do it in Photoshop? Like, how did you do it?
We did it with a program called ImageMagick. It's an open source Linux program.
So you did it manually.
The script did it automatically. So we had to give a set of commands that told ImageMagick exactly what to do, but ImageMagick took care of that.
Did you do it in bulk?
Yes, this is done in bulk. I didn't touch anything as the email went through.
Did you do thousands?
Yes. We could send emails through this all day, and it did the same exact thing to them.
Oh man. I'm saving my Walmart pizza out.
You're muted, Lulu. You're muted, Lulu.
Sorry, I just want to roll that back to where you can see both of those ballots side by side. I know, Cliff, you can't see, but I can just describe the screen for you. So there was a dot filled in for Joe Smith and Bill Johnson when the voters sent their ballot, and when the ballot arrived, that dot had been changed from Mary Kane to Elizabeth Martin. So
Yep, I see that.
You can see it a little bit.
Yep.
So, and what Lyle was telling us is that they can do this remotely on thousands and thousands of ballots. So, and Lyle at this time, he's a little older now, he was 18, and he really didn't even have much training. He just kind of had some advice from some of the more serious hackers there. This was at DEF CON. So I'm just wondering if that changes your, just seeing how easy
Not
it
in the
is
slightest.
doesn't change your view.
Not at
about
all.
This, and tell me why.
Because as I've told you before, as human beings, we can do anything that we set our minds to do. So if you want to hack something, you can do that. If you want to prevent it, you can do that too, in my opinion. The question is the focus and the effort and the priority. We can do this. That's what I believe.
Okay, but do you think that we're ready for it now? Because it seems like right now, and I'm just gonna remove that so we can just have more of a conversation. It seems like right now we're not really ready with the security. And I want at some point to play another video also. This was like a very simple hack, but there's some very sophisticated email internet voting happening right now, in particular from a company called Helios Voting. And it's got what's called end-to-end encryption, and it's very sophisticated encryption, but even that, they were able to hack it. And I want to show you that one as well. Benny, what's your thoughts about kind of the how hard it would be to actually vote securely on the internet?
Yeah, this can be next near impossible. Port 25 is something that technical people understand. It's just data packets at that point, and that's the reserved port for email and SMTP protocol. Most companies don't even allow it. Like a major corporation, they're not even given access to that port. Now there's things that can block that, like reverse DNS, and you're really up the technical ladder for the average layperson once you start dealing with ports. But ports are like ports. Like if you think about Louisiana as a big port, it's a shipping port. That's a big gaping opening. When you deal with war, if the first thing you want to to do is park your ships at a port, because you can transmit artillery and weapons down the port. So computers are the same way. If you have an open port anywhere, that is a huge vulnerability. So that's, just imagine the USB drive in a voting machine and just put a trailer full of Red Bull and steroids in it, and that's what you have with an email port.
And your mic is going out a little bit there.
Sorry, I just got to speak a little bit louder, but yeah, that's not the open ports are really bad on computers.
And any type of email voting is going to be an open port, is what you're saying?
Yeah, it has to go through a port.
All right. And Cliff, I don't know if you want to comment on that at all. I'm going to walk us through a little bit sort of where there is internet voting, what's been done, the different times that it's been hacked or compromised, and what, kind of like what people's efforts are right now. But I just want to keep giving you a chance to respond and let us know how you're thinking and how you're feeling, like as you're processing the information that's being presented.
Well, as I said, you could present almost anything to me. It's not going to change my mind in the slightest. I believe that, just as I said, just as much as you can hack something, I believe that the opposite is just as capable. And although I do agree with you that obviously there are some issues with it now, I'm not going to deny that. But I think that if we don't work on it, then we will never improve it. You need to do something. You need to have something out there in order for you to find a way to make it better. You can't make something better if you're not doing it at all.
And we have a question from Mark Shaw in the chat. Can't you encrypt the email? Benny, do you want to address that?
Not at the port level. Like, it's you guys are thinking email. It's just a data packet at the when you're dealing with the port. You can drop a movie off into port 25. You can drop a DVD. You can drop a recipe. Like, you can drop anything into that port, and the SMTP server, it doesn't know what is dropping off into that port. It just knows that it needs an address to send it to. So it's a really blind part of the computer operating environment that its job is not to be specific, so that you can, like, think about when you send an email, you can put all kinds of attachments. Every now and then you can try to block it from a zip file, but you can just rename it a TXT and it'll say it's a text file and let it go. So there are a lot of ways around internet protocol.
So let's just talk a little bit. I want you to, I just want to sort of talk a little bit about the history of internet voting, where internet voting has been used, where it's currently in use. So the first place that internet voting was actually used for a government election was in Arizona. And I think I've created a Google folder, and all of the documents that I'm going to talk about are in that folder. So if you want to grab any of these documents before, as I'm going, or afterwards, you're welcome to do so. So I'll put that link into the chat. This is the document folder, and I'll also put those up on our website after the forum. And the best thing is to get on our mailing list, because I always send out those links afterwards. So remember to get on our mailing list. So this was the very first time that internet voting was used. No, that's not what we wanted to share. Let me try again. It was in Arizona in 2000, and just get that up. And they didn't have any, they didn't have any serious problems in terms of security, as far as they know. They did have a very difficult time with some people just literally not being able to vote. But let me try to get this up again. And then I think what we have to remember also is that since 2000, the level of hacking has really, the skills of hackers has tremendously increased. Would you agree with that, Benny?
Say it again.
Since 2000, that we've really had a huge increase in the amount of hacking, in the skills of
Right.
hackers,
Yes.
to penetrate things. The security landscape is really very, very different. So this was 2000,
Yes.
and
I agree.
it was the Arizona Democratic primary. It featured the first binding internet election for public office. And one thing that's noticeable is they just had a lot of difficulties just with people actually voting. So 4% of registered Democrats tried to vote over the internet, but were unsuccessful and ultimately never cast a ballot. The most common problems were technical. Would-be voters logged onto the website, or the ballot did not appear. Computers were not able to accept cookies, or small programs from internet sites or older internet browsers were not able to connect. Some people said they did not receive a PIN number, and their personal information couldn't be verified. So one thing to keep in mind is that even though we think of internet voting as this way to make sure that everybody can vote, it could actually disenfranchise people, and it could, make it so that some people can't vote. What's happened more recently is that we're having internet voting pilots in a number of states. So West Virginia, this is a Wired article, actually started this pilot for internet voting very recently, and in the coming months, Delaware and New Jersey will join West Virginia in piloting a remote digital voting system. The company that's doing that is called Democracy Live. Eligible overseas and disabled voters will receive an email that contains directions on how to log into the firm's cloud portal, and then from there, voters basically fill out that PDF and print it or submit it electronically. And this is a question that I have for you, Cliff, is that when I spoke to you, these programs, like in West Virginia, as I understand it, are really limited. Like, you really need to prove that you're a voter with disability, that you have a need for this. Is that something that you're open to, that type of just very limited use?
No, I am not.
You're really interested in internet voting for everybody.
That's what inclusion means.
And do you want to talk about why does everybody have to vote on the internet? Couldn't some people vote on the internet and some people could still vote at polling locations?
I'm not saying that everybody should be forced to do it. I believe in options. I think we should have options, but those options shouldn't be limited to a specific group of people. They should just be limited to the person who decides they want to or not want to vote that way. You see what I'm saying?
I understand. I think that as soon as you open it up to internet voting for everybody, you have a huge mass of votes that is going to be a real target for hackers. If it's just 2 or 3 people, then it's quite possible, is that really worth hacking? But I think you exponentially increase the risks when you open that up to the general public.
I understand that there are issues with the way it is now. What I would say, though, if we're going to do that, obviously some work needs to be put into this. We can't I think that what they've been doing is just throwing this out there, basically the way things are. So obviously it's not going to work. It's almost as if they're doing it to prove it doesn't work. You need to be focused on exactly how this is going to be done. And I believe it can be done, but we have to make that a priority. Voting doesn't even seem to be a priority in this country when it should be. And if it was, I think things would be very different.
Well,
Bennie,
first we would have to tackle getting the internet for all individuals. Like, we haven't tackled that. And then you have issues of broadband, then you have county budgets, and then you have the accessibility of broadband in certain places. And that's an onion to ravel when you consider that most people in Memphis, even Memphis, we're a metropolitan city. I think we're the 18th or 19th largest city in America. Many people still don't have internet access here. They have to go to the public library. So I think
so they can keep voting that way.
I think access is a more of a utopian idea. I see it, not for the internet, but I do see the concept that Mr. Perez is going after. This will provide the widest range of use. But I think we have the esteemed David Jefferson on here, and I was looking at his comment. He said it was a national security disaster, and I agree with that. The internet, we only get to see 10% of the internet, of the real internet. So there is a lot that is left to be desired that is happening in a place like the internet.
So I want to just also address your comment. What you were saying, Cliff, is have we really tried this? And the answer is yes. we have really tried this. So now I want to share a website with you called Helios, because Helios is an actual internet voting program that is live and up and running in the US. It doesn't do government elections, but they do sort of small private elections. And some very, very, very bright people have worked on Helios. And let me just see, I'm going to share set. Okay, so this is the company, and it's run by Benedita, who, as I said, is not a dull pencil, like very, very, very bright individual. He's working with I don't know, Benny, do you want to say something about Benedita?
I was just laughing. You say it's not a dull pencil.
I mean, he's a very bright individual who has worked on this for years. And what I also want to show you is that and Helios has what they call end-to-end encryption. It's very, very protected with high-level encryption to make sure that the votes are the same when they leave as when they arrive. But even so, it was still hacked. It wasn't. There was a researcher who showed a proof of concept that demonstrated that it was not secure, actually. And I just want to play you a little bit of this, because this is very different from like the simple hack that that Lyle, the 18-year-old, demonstrated. This is somebody with incredibly dense technological skills. And for me, listening to it, most of it is gobbledygook. But what it makes me understand is that there are people who will go to extreme lengths to hack even very, very tight security. So I'm going to do my best. Let me try to share this video with you of this hack of Helios.
My name is Nick, and I'm a master's student of software engineering at Western University, working under Dr. Alexander Essex. In this video, I'm going to demonstrate an attack we carried out against a cryptographically secure internet voting system called Helios Voting. Before proceeding, I will let you know that after discovering the vulnerability, we contacted Ben from Helios and provided a fix which was deployed on May 30th, 2016. Helios is a cryptographically verifiable voting platform that allows anyone to host their own publicly verifiable election online. Helios has been used in multiple elections, claiming to have recorded over 100,000 votes. It has also been used by organizations such as the International Association for Cryptologic Research and the Bitcoin Foundation.
So we're just going to move along.
It is. Now let's take a look at how all of this happens. Right now, we're looking at Helios, which is being served by a virtual machine running Ubuntu 16.04 and is being accessed by the host machine running Windows 10. I'm going to go ahead and set up the election as the dishonest election official. So right now, I'm just entering details about the election name, deciding who's eligible to vote, and uploading my public key.
So one thing that he said is the way that he set up this hack was that somebody inside the election basically rigged the election, which is something that we have to beware of. So he set that up in the beginning.
This is where the small bug exists that will allow us to unfairly influence the election. First of all, we deviate from the default Helios behavior of letting Helios be the sole trustee by removing it and adding myself. I check my email for the link and I'm able to generate or upload a public key. Since Helios uses Elgamal encryption, the public key also defines the domain parameters. So as you can see here, we have a 2048-bit prime P, an order Q such that Q divides P-1, a generator G of order Q, and a public key Y, which equals G to the X mod P, where X is the secret key. Now that you can see the parameters, do you think anything's wrong with them? If not, don't worry. Helios doesn't think so either.
Okay, so he goes on and he demonstrates basically this hack, and it's, for someone like me, pretty incomprehensible.
Number looks large. It results in a subgroup GQ having small order of 647. We take advantage of this with a small modification to the script which loops until the real challenge for our ciphertext is congruent to 0 mod 647. Recall that in a Chomp-Peterson proof, the verifier is checking whether the following statements are true, where A is G to the W, B is Y to the W, Challenge and W are random elements mod Q, and response is W plus C times R. So let's substitute those values and see what we have. Now what happens if the challenge mod Q equals 0? The data that the proof is supposed to prove knowledge of is eliminated, leaving a trivial equivalence. So now let's look at the results of this election and see how it worked out. As we saw, Alice and I both casted legitimate ballots for Alice while Bob tried to do his own thing. We should
So we know that there's 2 votes for Alice because he and Alice both voted for themselves. I mean, both voted for Alice.
expect to see at least 2 votes for Alice and learn of Bob's decision, but as we see, this is not the case. With the final tally being 2-1 in favor of Bob, we see that Bob was successful in not only casting 2 ballots for himself, but also in taking 1 away from Alice.
So I don't know if you can see that because that's pretty small, but I'm going to try to see if I can blow it up on my screen a little bit. This hacker was able to get 2 votes for Bob and 1 vote for Alice. And then furthermore, he got the audit to confirm this, which is really interesting.
Perhaps more interesting is when we go to audit the election tally, we see that Helios validates this incorrect result. This situation makes us believe that when evaluating the security of verifiable systems, it is also worth considering the risk of the audit itself, for it may act as a witness against fraudulent results. To wrap things up, Helios.
Okay, so I'm going to go back to you again, Cliff, and just see if I just want to say, did that at least prove to you that people are really trying? There have been very, very dense encrypted applications attempted for internet voting, and they also have been penetrated. I think that people are trying. That's all I'm saying.
Well, like anything, you just have to, like advocacy, you have to be persistent. Easy answers are not going to just jump out at us. That's why they're hard. And they're hard so that we work harder to find an answer. There are always answers to all existing problems. The question is to pursue them and pursue them with vigor. So I still believe very strongly that we can find a way to have people vote that it's accessible to everyone. Now, maybe it isn't an email, because I'm not really saying that it should be an email. I'm just saying that the only way I know right now that is accessible to people with disabilities, and especially people who are blind, is digital or electronic voting. Now, if we can find some other way that makes it accessible, that'd be great for me too. I don't care what it is. I just want it to be accessible to everyone so that everyone exercises their given right to vote, like everybody has a right to vote. That's all I'm looking for.
And I think
I think that's a fair point. That's what I heard in your cadence. The internet. I could think about it when Tesla came out, and they was like kids hacking the cars. They was taking them over and driving them. Like this happens with nearly every piece of tech. There's going to be some kid. I think Apple got hacked like 10 or 11 times. They released a new iPhone. The guy had the mic turned on, and he was trying to tell Apple, look, I can turn your microphone on through this app. And I think Apple was ignoring him, and then they bought him like a Mustang and gave him a couple $1 million when they finally responded to him. So this just happens. It's just an environment that is so intangible that there's so many avenues and threat vectors that I don't think it's something that can be secured.
And this is, I think, Bruce Korb in the chat agreeing with that. We have been trying to prove programs correct for 50 years. The conclusion is that it cannot be done.
And this is just a lot of tech to throw at a basic counting exercise, right? Like you're technically going to count on a really good night 2,000 people in a single precinct. So counting from 1 to 2,000 should be a little bit easier than throwing a lot of tech at it.
Well, I think the issue is the accessibility. That's what Cliff is saying over and over again, is that people, and what I'm wondering, what I've wondered for a while is maybe that there are some trade-offs between privacy and internet access. So for example, you were talking about the secret ballot, how, prior to, I think early in the 20th century, we didn't have a secret ballot, and the secret ballot is considered really integral to, United States voting now, but maybe people who want to vote on the internet would need to do some sort of trade-off where each internet ballot that was sent had like a random one random race on the ballot would be checked. Like the election official could throw a dice and say, okay, I'm going to check the 6th ballot here, and actually speak. You'd have to have actually, contact with that voter and say, okay, I'm checking your 6th race, which is your race for city council. Did you vote for this person? And they say, yes, I voted for that person. So maybe, and again, to me, very limited implementation for people who really, really need this at this point. That would be kind of where I come down on it. But I know what you're saying, Cliff, is that that's not satisfactory for you. But maybe as like an, interim step, maybe something like that would be, a possibility.
As long as if it was open to anyone. You cannot have something, whether temporary or whatever, that is just for one group of people, like, this whole Plessy versus Ferguson. We can't be having that. So,
right, and I understand what you've said is that one of the main reasons why it's really a problem when people with disabilities are treated differently is that those systems aren't maintained. They're not respected. They're not turned on, and there's really a lack of attention to them. And I understand that is really an ongoing problem with many systems for people with disabilities.
What? Because we're still treated without any dignity or respect as a whole. And this is just one more aspect of this. And we can justify anything that we want to leave people out. And people with disabilities have been left out way too damn long, and that just needs to stop. We have a right to vote too.
I do want to show this report. So this is a report called the Berkeley Report, and it kind of came down, I'd say, very similar to where you are, Cliff. Really the main proponent of internet voting right now in terms of like big money is a gentleman named Bradley Tusk. And he is a very wealthy individual who made his money in Uber, and he has a couple priorities, and one of them is internet voting. And so he has, and I think we just lost Bennie, just so you know, he had to go to his election, and he let us know that he was going to be leaving ahead of time. Thank you so much, Bennie. So what happened was with Bradley Tusk is that he got a lot of pushback about internet voting. And so he agreed to have a working group form, and he agreed that he would abide by the decisions of the working group. And the working group was made up of some very knowledgeable professionals from a variety of communities. If you look at these people, this includes like Ron Rivest from MIT, who's a famous cryptologist, as well as Maurice Turner, who previously was with the Election Assistance Commission. Other people who many people here probably know, Amber McReynolds, who's a real big proponent of voting by mail. But what happened with the commission, the working group, is that they really came down at a place which is kind of basically what we're coming to here, with Cliff saying we really need to keep trying, but security people saying it really isn't possible right now. So this was, if you look at the number 3 on their recommendation, the working group concludes that the current cybersecurity environment and state of technology make it infeasible for the working group to draft responsible standards to support the use of internet ballot return in US public elections at this time. They're basically just saying they can't even make recommendations. It's just not responsible. But they do say that the working group recommends increased investment from all levels of government for the secure and accessible administration of elections, regardless of voting methods. So basically they're coming down there and they're saying, really, we've got to keep trying, what you're saying, Cliff, and not just with the internet, but exactly, however we can, we've got to keep trying to include people.
No matter what the method is, as long as it's accessible and people can use it.
Right. And I do just want to get one more quote in here, because Ron Rivest was on this commission and he was quoted in another article. And this was an article from The Intercept. And he said, when people ask for best practices for voting online, it's rather like asking for best practices for driving drunk. And I think that's sort of where this commission came down. And that's where security experts tend to come down, is that it's just at this point not responsible. But I think there is a lot a growing awareness of the difficulties that people with disabilities face, the need for inclusion, the need for sensitivity even, and respect, which are all things that I hear you saying, Cliff.
And, you know, even if the polling sites were agreeable, for lack of a better term, that would be wonderful in itself, but we don't even have that.
Right. So I think that is something that is very possible, is that we can really improve the voting experience in the polling location for people with disabilities. And I know here in New York, we have, because of the lawsuit now, an accessible ballot, which is at least one way on the internet. The ballot comes to the voter on the internet, and they do have to navigate that printer and mailing it back, as you said, which can be difficult. But again, there could be more support for that. There could even be, you know, official places set up, you know, or official people from the elections department assigned to assist voters with disabilities. You know, someone could even come to your home and help you print it out and mail it. You know, that type of assistance would actually be considerably less expensive than creating an entire encrypted and insecure online voting.
That's something I agree with you 100%. That's what I mean when I say, I don't care what it is, as long as it's accessible and people can vote. So I'm not really pushing electronics or email voting. It's just, as I said, I just don't know another way. If somebody can come up with another way that it works, then great. I just want people to be able to vote. That's really all I'm trying to do.
I think that's wonderful. And I do want to just point out that Cliff is not the only one advocating for this. This is really a position of many disability rights groups. And here, this is one of the main groups advocating for it. This is NCIL, which is the
National Council on Independent Living.
Thank you so much. And they do a lot of great work for voters with disabilities. They've been engaged in that field for a long time, and they're very adamant about internet voting. Digital voting must be a choice for voters with disabilities, regardless of their circumstances. So it's basically voters with disabilities who choose to vote remotely. The term digital voting means the electronic delivery of a blank ballot to an eligible voter, the electronic marking and verification of the voter selections, and the voted ballot's electronic return. There must be no requirement for a voter to handle a paper ballot. So this is, you know, not just Cliff, this is an adamant position from many people in the disability rights community. And what we're trying to do here is have a dialogue. We're trying to really engage with the security community and the disability rights community. When I first started this work, I found that there really was not that much dialogue, and there was a lot of kind of tone deafness on both sides. And so to me, I think this is very useful to make sure we're listening to each other, that people with disabilities do learn more about the security protocols and about the difficulties, the challenges, and that the security community also becomes much more sensitive to the challenges that voters with disabilities are facing. Are we?
You're on the money, Lulu.
Okay, that's great. That's terrific. I thought we would be able to come to some sort of agreement, even if it's not on everything. So we have like 3 minutes left. And I think a fun one to end on, this is sort of my favorite hack of internet voting. So I think we'll go out on this one. So in, I believe, 2010, Washington, D.C. decided to do a pilot project for internet voting. And they opened it up to the public. They said, anybody who wants to try to hack it, go ahead, which is nice. It'd be great if more election vendors and election officials were like that, and we'd have more real world testing. But J. Alex Halderman, who many of us know is probably one of the world's top hackers, had his graduate students at the University of Michigan work on this, and I've actually seen video of them. They videotape themselves, and it's not that exciting. It's like them in a room for 12 hours, sort of like taking turns on the computer and not sleeping and drinking a lot of caffeinated soda, as I remember. If that video is not on the internet anymore, so I couldn't show it to you. But what I can show you is the report that they did produce, and basically what happened. Pretty sure I have this one up. Yeah, here we go. Okay, so they did in fact hack the DC Internet Pilot Project, And not only did they hack it, they were able to pretty much access every aspect of it. So I think you can see, I'm going to read this for those who can't see, but our demonstration attacks, we collected crucial, and this is from Michigan, keep in mind, they did this remotely from Michigan to Washington, D.C. We collected crucial secret data stored on the server, including the database username and password, as well as the public key used to encrypt the ballots. We modified all the ballots. All the ballots. We installed a back door that let us view any ballots that voters cast after our attack. So they modified all the ballots so far, and they modified ballots that hadn't, they set up a program to modify ballots that hadn't even been cast yet. And this is my favorite part, to show that we had control of the server, we left a calling card on the system's confirmation screen, which voters see after voting. And after 15 seconds, the page plays the University of Michigan fight song. And you know what's hilarious about that? So basically, remotely from Michigan, they took control, they changed all the ballots, they programmed the voting machine to play their fight song, and they actually took control of the security cameras in the room as well. It's remarkable how much they were able to do. So I think it's just definitely something for us all to keep in mind, is that there are creative people who have the time and energy to really get into the, you know, the deep parts of our computer, and they can be dangerous. So it's funny because they played the fight song, but it also is something for us all to keep in mind.
Well, it's unfortunate that it's easier to destroy than to build, and this is part of that.
That is so true. And I think one of the things that is so frustrating about security is that when you're building a security protocol to protect something, you have to be right 100% of the time. But the hacker only has to be right once. They only have to find one little, you know, zero-day exploit. They only have to find one little bug in millions and millions of lines of code. And so it's very, very challenging to always to protect something, because the hacker only has to be right once. But I appreciate all the work that you've done and your determination that people with disabilities need to vote accessibly, and I'm completely committed to that as well. And I really appreciate you being here with us today, and I think everybody here really values all the work that you're doing. Okay, it's 8:01, so we're going to close. We can do a quick vote. Anybody in the chat, go ahead and vote yes for internet voting or no for internet voting, and go ahead and put them in there, and we'll see. We'll do a quick poll. Yes means you're going to support internet voting rolling out. No means not at this time. But I'm sure that everybody is supporting the other types of programs that we've talked about, making it easier. Okay, this is going to come as no surprise to you with our audience, Cliff, but it's the no's. It's the no's. No, no, a big long no. And you can attack an internet election without there being any bug in the software. Denial of service attacks, for example. No, no, no. Okay, what about you, Cliff? Are you voting yes to keep trying?
Of course I would.
Okay. So we have one yes vote, and I'm a yes for supporting voters with disabilities in any way that we can, and much, much more than we do now. Much more, I think. And like we said, we agree on that. Okay, so that's our program for the evening. Please do remember to sign up for our mailing list. And while you're there on our website, please take a minute and make a donation. That supports the work that we do. That's at smartelections.us. And I'll put the link into the chat. And Cliff, I'm going to say thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for asking me, Lulu.
I totally value the work you're doing, and that you're here fighting for what you believe in. And it's really, really, it's really courageous. And I really respect you a lot.
Thank you, Lulu. I respect you too for what you do. And I'm glad that we had this, because I get to know you a little bit better. And I always like to get to know, I always like to know individuals better.
I feel like I know you so much better, and I can appreciate you, and what a great sense of humor you have also.
I tried.
Okay. Awesome. Okay, so I am going to throw that link in the chat for smartelections.us because if you can, stop over there. And if you just click on donate, there's 2 different ways to donate. You can donate via PayPal, or you can donate via our website. Either way, we get the funds. It is tax deductible. We are a non-for-profit with 501c3 status. And we are going to have another forum on February 28th. So we're always the 4th Tuesday of the month. And the forum in February is going to be a tribute to the Reverend Dr. T. Anthony Spearman, who is a wonderful civil rights leader and also somebody who really understood election security and understood that election security was important for civil rights. And he unfortunately died. He was killed in North Carolina, where he was the former president of the NAACP. And I'm very, very sad that he was killed. And I want to pay tribute to him because he was an amazing human being. So please join us February 28th for that. Sign up again on the website, smartelections.us. And thank you all for being here. Really awesome and vibrant chat as always. Put those comments in the chat if you enjoyed it. We really need those comments. And thank you very much.